Hi there, I'm Brother Merrill, and this is Sunshine for the Soul, Inspirational Stories. In this episode, I'm going to tell some personal stories and give you a little background as to how I started doing this. I hope you'll enjoy it and indulge me in these personal experiences. I felt very compelled to share inspirational stories. When I was young, I remember over the pulpit in Sunday school and in sacrament meetings, people would frequently share miraculous or inspirational events that had taken place as a form of inspiration. And it seems to me that we have gotten away from that. There's almost a feeling that if you talk about a miraculous event that took place in your life, that it's tarnished because you shared it. And I don't think that's true. I think we need to share our interactions with the Lord. When we see the hand of the Lord in our lives, I think we should shout it out and share it with those who have ears to hear. And that's what I'd like to do today. I had an experience a few weeks ago as I was preparing one of the episodes, and I had several experiences that some of the listeners had had, but I didn't feel like I had quite enough to do a full episode. And I have a lot of books. I buy used books. Some of them are from the early 1900s and all the way up to current books. And I have a stack of over 75 of them in my bathroom, and I don't have them to where you can see the titles or anything. I just have them all stacked there. As I prayed that morning about where to find one more inspirational story to fill the need of this episode, I had a very specific book cover come to my mind. And I didn't think it would have what I needed in it. You know how you kind of argue with the inspirations the Lord gives you, but after I prayed, I went upstairs and I grabbed that one book. I looked through it and I didn't really see anything, and then towards the back of the book, I found the story that I shared. And I thought, isn't that amazing? That the Lord would enlighten my mind and give me the inspiration that I needed for just a small task, relatively unimportant thing. But I knew the Lord had guided me and directed me with that. I think quite often in our life we predetermine the course we're going to go, the things we want to accomplish, and we kind of don't want the Lord to interfere. We want him to guide us, but at the same time, sometimes we resist the guidance that comes into our mind and into your heart. I've worked at the temple for 28 years, and I had always told my wife that when I retired, I would like to serve as a temple missionary in one of the Polynesian temples. And so as we neared that time of our life, we booked a cruise that went down through the Polynesian islands, and we visited 6 temples while we were gone. And as we were cruising back towards the west coast of the United States, my wife and I talked about it, and neither one of us really felt like there was a specific temple we should serve in, and we just didn't feel right about it. And we came home, it was during the winter, and we were skiing one day, and I'm very vocal about the fact that I'm a recovering addict. And I was riding up on the lift with my wife and a young man, and I mentioned that I was a recovering addict, and he shared that he was suffering from addiction. And we began to talk about the addiction recovery programs that were available, both those from the church and those in the general public, that were so helpful. We skied down that run, and then the next ride up, it was just my wife and I on the chairlift. And I said, honey, maybe we ought to serve as addiction recovery missionaries. And right there on the lift at Sundance, just the Spirit of the Lord confirmed to both of us that that's what we should do. And so we started to attend some of the local meetings. We found out who the mission director was in our area, Elder Ma, and we reached out to him, and we began the process of signing up as service missionaries in the Family Services Department in the Addiction Recovery Program. And we We served in that capacity for about a year and a half. And then Elder Ma and his wife decided that they were going to go on a full-time mission to Africa. A good friend of theirs had been called as the mission president. So we realized that they were going to be released. Both my wife and I separately received a feeling that we would be called as the new directors for the addiction recovery program, Healing Through the Savior, for the Provo BYU area. It seemed like that was a little bit of a ridiculous thought, as there were a lot of people that had served very faithfully and done a beautiful job for a long time, a lot longer than we had served. But sure enough, one day the phone rang and it was Elder Ma. I said, "I know what you're calling for." And he chuckled, because he's been in a stake presidency and he's had that same experience. But the Lord confirmed to my wife and I a month and a half before we received the call that we would be serving in that capacity. And then a month and a half later, that was confirmed. The Lord whispers to our heart and to our mind the things that we need to know, and he helps guide us and direct us in our lives. We need to have ears to hear his voice. We need to practice acting on the things that he tells us. And as we do, his voice becomes more clear in our mind. About 10 days ago, I had a rather miraculous experience take place, and I need to give a little background. When I was a young man, my father was excommunicated and left the church. My mother had always been a closet alcoholic and was never really converted to the gospel. I had a very moving experience. In high school, I was not a good member of the church. I would go occasionally with friends, but I didn't keep the word of wisdom, and I was not trying to live the gospel in any way. As my friends prepared to go to college, I told them I didn't need to do that. I didn't need to take the ACT tests or all these college level classes that they were taking in high school. That I was going to be a ski bum. So I took wood shop, and I had work release in the afternoon, and I went skiing all from about 11 o'clock on every day. And I had a lot of fun, and I was sure that that's what I wanted to do. In fact, this picture over here is a flip that I did. It's never been done since. It's the only tandem flip ever done in the world. Scott Miles and I did that, and I was very active competitively in what we called hot dog skiing. And I had a season's pass as snowbird after I graduated from high school, and it was the earliest year that Snowbird ever had. They opened on October 28th. I skied 168 days that season. And towards the end of the season, I was building a huge jump. I wanted to beat Daryl Wagstaff's 165-foot layout flip, do the longest layout flip ever done. And I had found a perfect place, and I spent several days up in the peaks building this huge jump. As I did, it was the close of the season, and I thought about the year I had just finished and all the days of skiing I'd had. And it was, at the time, a record snowfall year, 1972-73. We had storm after storm, just tons of snow all year, the best snow you could ever imagine. And I thought, I could ski every year, and maybe 1 out of 20 years might be as good as this one was. And I thought, is that all there is to life? And it really got me thinking about things. And I had a spiritual experience up there in the peaks and became active in the church, went on a mission. And when I came home, I made a really stupid decision and was married to a young lady. She left on Christmas Day. And all of a sudden I found myself moving from my 3-bedroom Rambler with a full basement to a 8 by 14 foot trailer at the KOA campground. And as a result, I didn't have anywhere to put any of my things that I had kept from my life. And so I boxed up everything, and I had a good friend, the fellow that's in this picture here with me, Scott Miles, and he and his wife were renting a little house over in southwest Provo. It had a single-car garage, and I said, Scott, Dana, would you mind if I kept this box in your garage? And they said, well, we're only renting this house, but you're welcome to keep it here. Well, that was in 1980. They lived in that house for 2 years, and then when they moved out, a member of the Elders Quorum presidency that served with Scott, Phil Murphy, decided that he would like to move into that house. So he and his wife began to rent that same house. And they rented it until interest rates came down, and they bought it. And they lived there for quite some time, and then they moved out and rented it. And that whole time, there was a stack of boxes in the back of this single-car garage that different renters had just discarded and left. And they never went through the boxes. They just kind of left them where they were. And 2 years ago, before my wife and I became missionaries in the addiction recovery program, the Murphys sold that house. Now, most people would have just taken all those boxes in the back of that garage and taken them to the dump. But the Murphys aren't like that, and they decided they should go through those boxes. So 10 days ago, Elder Murphy came into our monthly coordination meeting, and the meeting was just about to begin. And he said, Lance, I need to talk to you a minute. And all the missionaries were up in the room. I was up in the front getting ready to conduct the meeting. I had everything ready to go. And he said, no, I really need to talk to you right now. And so I walked down, and he had this great big box. And it was a Christmas present. And I was feeling rather embarrassed because I hadn't brought any Christmas presents. We had a few cookies for after the meeting. And here he had this great big, beautifully wrapped Christmas parcel with a big red bow. I was a little nervous because everyone in the meeting was turned around looking at me and wondering why I had walked away from the front of the room. And Elder Murphy handed me this envelope, and he said, just take a minute and open this envelope. And so I did. And as I opened it, I found this picture of my dad right before he went on his mission. I dug a little deeper in the envelope, and here was a picture of me with my sister, Zan, and my brother, Chris. And I said, where did you get these things? He goes, I'd really like you to open this present if you would. And by this time, everyone had turned around, and they were watching, and so I ran up, and I said, Elder Foote, would you conduct the meeting for a minute? I'm just going to hurry and open this box. And so I tore the Christmas wrapping off this box, and inside were some personal treasures. This is my original birth certificate. This is my mission call, signed by Spencer W. Kimball. And these are the 14 letters that my dad wrote me on my mission. My dad's been gone since 1978. And these are very dear to me. These things are all very dear to me. I have letters from my grandparents and my siblings and friends. I have quite a few other personal things that I had decided I didn't want to lose. And yet, through the commotion of going through my divorce, I'd forgotten about that box. And thank heavens that Brother and Sister Murphy decided to look through that box. If they'd have looked through it when they first sold the house, they wouldn't even have known who I was. But 2 years later, they were serving in the same mission that we were. And they knew who we were. I don't know what the purpose is for me receiving all these wonderful gems, but they're treasures to me. And I thank the Lord for that. And I'm sure that in the future, there is some reason that I needed to retrieve those items that were lost through 45 years of time, only to find me. Thanks, Elder Murphy. Before I finish today, a lot of people have asked questions about things in the background. And I'm rather artistic. I probably don't look like it, but my dad was an artist. My sister's an artist. And so I have tried to arrange this background in a rather exacting way. But people have commented on the books. I was the only member of my family who was active in the church as my grandparents' lives were concluding. And I used to go visit them once or twice a month. And they'd always say, put your name on something, Lance. And I'd always say, I don't want your stuff. I'm not here to collect things. And they say, no, just put your name on something. And so one book at a time, I started to write my name in books that my grandfather had. And so I have been blessed to have some wonderful books. This one is of interest to people who are collectors of books. It's the original edition of Mormon Doctrine by Bruce R. McConkie. It's signed by Bruce R. McConkie. The leaders of the church made him pull this off the shelves because he said quite a few things in there that needed to be retracted. But it's a very interesting book. I always chuckle about some of the entries about psychiatrists and other things that are in here. The next group of books is B.H. Roberts' History of the Church, the First Century. And this is a 1930 edition. It's a beautiful 6-volume set. I have read the whole thing, and it's a beautiful book. It has these beautiful artistic lithographs in each book that give a bit of information about what was going on during this particular part. But it's a beautiful set of books. I also have the Discourses of Brigham Young, Teachings of the Prophet, and quite a few other books that my grandfather gave me. Doctrines of Salvation, Gospel Doctrine, marvelous work and a wonder. Anyway, I've been blessed to have some wonderful books. So that's in answer to the people who've asked, what are those books behind me? I've also had a lot of comments about this geode behind me. A lot of people apparently think it looks like a halo. I don't think Jim Steele would consider it a halo. I lived across the street from Jim and was his home teacher for about 10 or 12 years. And I was there every day toward the last couple of years of his life, and came home one day and he had fallen and split his head open on this geode. And when his family was clearing things out after he had passed away, they asked if there's anything I would like. I told them, it's your dad, it's your family's things. And they said, well, isn't there something you'd like? Dad loved you like a son. And I said, I'd love one of his geodes. And they had kind of split up. He had some really, really nice geodes that he'd gotten in Brazil, some amethyst geodes and other things. But this one that he split his head open on, they didn't want. And so that geode has kind of a sordid history. It comes from off the banks below Nauvoo, and I cut it in half for him and polished it. So that's where that geode comes from. I know this is kind of a different episode for me to do, to talk about all these personal things, but I want people to know that listen to me, that the Lord speaks to us, not just the prophet, not just the apostles, but we can hear the voice of the Lord. It doesn't happen all at once. It doesn't happen in a big booming voice, but whispers in our mind will give us direction and guidance and information. And as we learn to listen to that voice and follow the promptings we receive, we hear it more clearly. I know the Lord loves you. Every one of you, no matter who you are, no matter what you've done, you are in a position to be helped by our Savior Jesus Christ. You can feel the Lord's love for you. If you doubt that, kneel down and ask the Lord. Really ask Him. Feel it in your heart. A desire to know, is God there? God, do you love me? And I promise you, if you will do that, you will feel the Lord's love pour into your heart and wash across your mind. It will reassure you that the Lord is there. The Lord knows you and he loves you. I hope you've enjoyed this episode today. I know it was rather personal, and I thank you for indulging me. You can subscribe here. And if you enjoyed this story, you'll probably enjoy this one. And you can watch all of Brother Merrill's Sunshine for the Soul right here. Thank you.